China's economy is losing momentum across the board. GDP growth has slipped from 7.6% to 5.5%. Real estate investment is down from 15% to 11%, and export growth has plummeted from 8.7% to just 2.3%. China's economic slowdown is more serious than you think. Consumption, property, and exports, the three main engines, are all losing steam. Is this a cyclical downturn or a sign of deeper structural issues? Today, let's investigate. In this episode, we'll systematically examine what has slowed China's economy in 2025 and whether it can restart. Over the past decade, China's GDP grew at an average of 6.8%, but since 2021, that figure has declined sharply. In Q1 2025, year-on-year GDP growth hit just 5.5%, the lowest since 2002. This isn't random. From monetized urban renewal to infrastructure stimulus and post-COVID housing bailouts, China's government-led investment model has run out of steam. Meanwhile, the three engines, consumption, real estate, and exports, are all decelerating. Old drivers are fading, while new ones like innovation and high-quality development have yet to gain traction. Today, we'll examine these three sectors to understand the complex transition and tug-of-war within China's economy. In the first quarter of 2025, China's total retail sales of consumer goods rose by only 5.5% year-on-year, a clear slowdown compared to 7.6% in the same period of 2023. Behind this trend lies a triple pressure: slower growth in disposable income, weakening consumer confidence, and rising household debt. Let's start with income. In 2024, the per capita disposable income of urban residents increased by just 3.9%, a sharp drop from 8.1% in 2021. This isn't just about the broader economic slowdown. It's that wages are growing more slowly than the costs of housing, education, and healthcare. As a result, households have less real spending power. Now let's look at confidence. A recent national survey by the National Bureau of Statistics found that 42% of households expect their income to stay the same or decline over the coming year, up from just 28% in 2022. Faced with unstable housing prices and uncertain job prospects, many families are choosing to save rather than spend. At the same time, household debt burdens are increasing. In 2024, the balance of consumer loans rose by 12% year-on-year, the fastest growth since 2018. This includes credit card installments, consumer financing, and mortgage-backed loans. Rising debt means more income must go toward repayments, leaving less for daily consumption. Regional disparities also matter. In coastal areas like the Yangtze River Delta and Pearl River Delta, retail sales grew by 6.2%. But in inland provinces, especially in central and western China, the growth rate was just 4.1%. This uneven recovery has left some regions with even weaker economic momentum, further weighing on consumption. Recent observations show that weekday foot traffic at cafes in some Chinese cities has dropped by around 20% compared to last year. The presence of white-collar customers has noticeably declined. Similarly, in community supermarkets across various regions, more and more shoppers are focusing solely on discounted items. The average order value has fallen from 78 yuan to 64 yuan. In short, the combined effect of slower income growth, weakening consumer confidence, and rising household debt is steadily eroding China's most vital growth engine: domestic consumption. Since 2024, China's real estate sector has undergone unprecedented policy easing. To counter prolonged market weakness, the government rolled out a series of measures, including cutting mortgage rates and down payment requirements to boost home buying demand. In May 2025, the central bank lowered the 5-year loan prime rate, LPR, to 3.5%, the lowest in recent years. At the same time, the Housing Provident Fund loan rate was also reduced by 0.25 percentage points. Commercial banks in many cities now offer first home mortgage rates as low as 3.7%, significantly lower than in previous years. Down payment requirements were also relaxed. In Beijing, the minimum down payment for first-time buyers was cut to 15% and to 20% for second homes. Other major cities such as Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Shanghai followed suit. Several cities also removed home purchase and resale restrictions to help clear housing inventory. Still, the market response has been tepid. In April 2025, new home prices fell by 4% year-on-year, marking the second consecutive month of flat or negative growth. In the first 4 months of 2025, real estate investment fell by 10.3%, and total floor space sold dropped by 2.8%. Analysts point out that despite aggressive policy support, buyer confidence remains low. On one hand, income uncertainty is weighing on households. On the other, people fear buying at a high point only to watch prices fall. Structural issues continue to hold back recovery. In lower-tier cities, inventories remain high, and demand has been largely exhausted. Developers are still under financial strain. Some guaranteed delivery projects have resumed, but the pace and quality of completion remain uncertain. The downturn in real estate has also dragged down related industries: construction, interior design, and raw materials. Meanwhile, the land market remains sluggish. In 2024, nationwide land sales revenue dropped by over 30%, leaving many local governments with budget shortfalls and constrained infrastructure spending. In short, even with the most aggressive policy easing in history, the real estate market has failed to rebound. This suggests that China's long-standing over-reliance on property is beginning to unravel, marking a painful structural transition in the economy. Although China's total exports in April 2025 rose by 8.2% year-on-year, this growth primarily came from low-margin markets such as ASEAN, Latin America, and Africa. In contrast, exports to the U.S. declined by 21%. The rise in overall export value conceals growing imbalances in shrinking profitability. Traditional labor-intensive industries, home appliances, textiles, furniture, are receiving more orders but at significantly lower prices. Many trade associations and business surveys have reported that a large proportion of small and medium-sized exporters, likely more than 40%, have experienced declining orders or shrinking margins in 2024 to 2025. Many firms are forced to cut prices to maintain volume. In regions like Guangdong and Jiangsu, manufacturers are increasingly turning to automation to control costs, often without expanding employment and, in many cases, laying off workers. In Changzhou, Jiangsu, a garment factory cut night shifts and laid off 20% of its staff. In Dongguan, some electronics factories canceled overtime and reduced operations. This trend of more volume, less profit has not translated into improved business expectations. Instead, more companies are choosing to preserve the core business, don't expand, and shift to an automation plus minimal staffing model. In April 2025, wage protests broke out in Hunan, Sichuan, and Inner Mongolia. In Suining, Sichuan, more than 200 workers blocked a government building demanding action. In Guangzhou, furniture workers staged sit-ins with banners reading, "We want to eat." Social media accounts like It Yesterday, Big Cat have documented cases of wage arrears, factory closures, and production cuts across Luan, Anhui, Zhejiang, Jiangxi, Shaoyang, Hunan, and Shuchang, Yohenan, providing grassroots evidence of a broader industrial contraction. International media have also reported on these developments. Reuters highlighted that despite export growth, U.S. shipments fell 21%, pointing to deepening structural imbalances. The Financial Times noted mass layoffs and output cuts in Chinese factories following 145% U.S. tariffs. China Labor Bulletin reported that garment sector job losses surged amid declining global orders. Several English-language outlets emphasized that export growth failed to translate into job gains and that cost-cutting and automation fueled factory closures. Thus, while export volume has grown, its contribution to employment, income, and investment remains limited. The increase in orders has not led to genuine economic improvement. It has instead exposed the fragility of China's export-reliant growth model. Under the Trump-led administration, U.S.-China relations in 2025 have entered their most hostile period in decades. Tariffs and tech sanctions have raised costs for Chinese firms globally, forcing them to accelerate economic restructuring. These measures are part of a wider policy shift. 34% universal tariffs on Chinese goods have been implemented, targeting consumer electronics, machinery, and steel. AI and semiconductor export bans have tightened, restricting access to critical tools like NVIDIA chips and Synopsys EDA software. Chinese student visa cancellations have surged, particularly for students in STEM fields and those with ties to Chinese institutions. Investment reviews under CFS-US have blocked numerous Chinese acquisitions in American agriculture, infrastructure, and biotech. Technology sanctions have restricted Chinese access to advanced components, dealing heavy blows to semiconductors, AI, and telecom industries. Geopolitical tensions have also made global capital more cautious, and foreign direct investment into China has sharply declined. The trade war has disrupted the international trade order and global supply chains, creating additional uncertainty. Chinese companies are facing mounting resistance in overseas investments and market expansion, prompting them to localize their supply chains. The combination of external shocks and internal weaknesses in consumption, real estate, and exports is pushing China toward a transition to innovation-driven, high-quality growth. But this transformation will take time. Yet this transition is only part of the problem. Deeper structural contradictions may ultimately determine the future trajectory of China's economy. Beyond the short-term difficulties in consumption, real estate, and exports, China faces several long-term structural issues. First, the country is experiencing a rapidly aging population and a shrinking young labor force, which severely limits productivity growth. Aging also increases the burden on the pension system and leads to more conservative consumption behavior, further constraining the space for economic expansion. Second, local governments are burdened with high levels of debt. Hidden financial risks are beginning to emerge, and fiscal capacity remains under pressure. The investment model driven by land-based finance is becoming increasingly unsustainable, and the space for infrastructure spending has significantly contracted. At the same time, business confidence is weak, especially among private enterprises, which continue to struggle. Financing remains difficult and costly. Policy uncertainty has led many firms to adopt a wait-and-see attitude, significantly weakening investment willingness and further draining internal economic momentum. At present, China's three major economic pillars, consumption, real estate, and exports, are all failing simultaneously. The traditional model of government-led investment-driven growth is reaching its limits. Meanwhile, heightened US-China tensions, combined with domestic structural problems, have become major obstacles to economic recovery. Beneath the surface of a few macro indicators that appear to be rebounding lies a heavy dependence on external shocks and internal structural fragility. The core issue is no longer whether growth occurs, but whether that growth is healthy, sustainable, and inclusive. In the face of such a complex and severe situation, how will China respond? What are the deeper causes behind the US-China trade war? And what does China's path since joining the WTO really signify? We'll continue to explore these critical questions in the next episode. Stay tuned.